Okay, we're going to pick up where we left off from the previous video. We were still on what is social studies. We're down to the sixth one, history, my favorite. This is what we're going to concentrate on this year. We're going to concentrate on ancient history, but of course we will incorporate all of these other topics, all of these other categories. History here, our definition here is history is the study of man's past, thoughts, and actions, and how those thoughts and actions affect the world today. So many of you said this when you filled out that question about what is social studies. Many of you said it's not simply just learning a bunch of dates and events and people. It has to do with learning what has happened in the past, how that affects us today, how it can help us today. So this is a phrase I'll use oftentimes, thoughts and actions. So what you think, what you believe determines how you act and how you live. So that's the way it has always been. History is the study of man's past, thoughts, and actions. So I'm going to take a look at more specifically where we're going to be this year in ancient history. So on this map, you'll see a general area of the world. Over here's Africa, over here's Asia, up here's Europe. We're pretty much going to be in this general area, specifically in the box, but a little bit outside the box too. So we're going to talk about the areas of where Iraq and Iran are. We're going to go into ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the Roman Empire. Over here in Italy, we're going to do a little bit in ancient China and ancient India. So that gives you an idea of the different civilizations, the different areas where we're going to be. So how do we study history from the way back? The way back when there was no writing. How do we understand how these civilizations developed, how they grew, without them having written down anything? So we study history oftentimes by artifacts, and we still do that today. We have modern artifacts we look at that tell us how people live, but these are really important for ancient times because they tell us a lot about how people live. So what exactly is an artifact? So once again, go to goodoldictionary.com. Here's some definitions. Artifact is an object made by human beings, especially with a view to subsequent use. So this is a good example of when you look up a definition for a word, and we're going to run into lots of words that are unfamiliar to us this year. You want to make sure you have a definition that you understand, a definition you can put into your own words so you have a better idea of what this word means that you're looking up. So the first part we pretty much got, an object made by human beings. So artifacts are objects. They're not living beings. They're not animals, they're not fossils, which are remains of something that was living. So artifacts are objects and made by human beings. And here it says, especially with a view to subsequent use. So we need to know what subsequent use means. Subsequent use means afterwards, continuing. So when something has been made or invented, it's with the idea that it's going to be used again, and that hopefully it will be improved upon. Second definition here is pretty good as well. You think more of ancient times with this. Handmade object, a tool, maybe the remains of one, a shard of pottery, something that's characteristic of an earlier time, certain culture. Something especially found in an archaeological excavation. So archaeology has to do with the study of things, the study of objects. And we just heard about earlier that anthropology has to do with the study of human beings. So anthropology, human beings, archaeology, objects. Excavation simply means when you're digging up things. So artifacts can go all the way back to the way back, or they can be something that we look at in modern times that show us about how people live. So a few examples are these that I have here in front of you. One is a piece of pottery here. There's a piece of pottery over here. Oftentimes the pottery will have painted on it scenes from daily life. The Greeks oftentimes did this where they had pictures and paintings on their pottery of the Spartans or soldiers. Down here you have some toys that younger kids may have played with, and then here you have a coin. A coin is considered an artifact. Coins tell us that people started using money, started using currency to get their products and their goods. So at some point the bartering stopped. Bartering is when you're exchanging goods for goods, products for products. So money came onto the scene at some point in time, and we understand that that's how the bartering started to come to an end. Over to the side here, you have a bunch of glassware, and these objects came from the Titanic, so it shows us about life in the early 1900s. Lots of glass, lots of very nice glass was made, and they were used for many different things. So you don't see any Tupperware here, you don't see any plastic types of things here. Okay, and then what we have here are some more modern day artifacts. This is a lawnmower. This is considered a manual lawnmower, so if someone owned one of these, that means they would have to have a lawn to mow, which means they owned property, typically a house on some property. Usually if they own something like this, it would mean that they mowed their own lawns, that they did not have a lawn service that did that for them. Over here we have what's called a VCR. So this played VHS tapes, which you could either rent, you could buy, you could get blank ones, you could watch movies at home. And this showed us a little bit more about people's lives, in that people were now starting to have some more leisure time. They were able to sit at home and watch movies, or you could record something that maybe you missed while you were working or while you were out and about. So many people did have these back in the 80s, in the 90s. They were a pretty big deal. Okay, then there's also some other modern day artifacts. These are typewriters. This is an original typewriter. These are where they started from. Maybe you have seen one of these. If you listen, this is the sound that a typewriter would make when you were typing on one, a little bit louder than a computer would be. I have one of these in my room, and what you would do is you would type, obviously, your letters onto here. There were stamps, so if you typed an A, that A would pop up and it would stamp a black or a red color onto a piece of paper, and that's how you would get your letters and your words onto a piece of paper. Then we moved along and we got what was called a word processor, which did just that. It processed words. It kind of looks like a mini computer, but it's not. You would again type in your letters and your words. They would show up on the screen, and you could actually correct them on the screen before you printed them out. So these are what came before the modern day computers. And then over here is what we call a stationary rotary phone, where if you were to make phone calls on this, you would have to stay in one place. You could not walk around with your phone. If you sat and chatted with someone for hours at a time, you'd be sitting in one place chatting with them. So this is what the phones used to look like back in the day. So this tells us a little bit about how people lived. And then, last but not least, we've got a very, very modern day artifact, which is the iPhones that we use now. This tells us a lot about how we live. Especially what you have on your phone tells a lot about you, characteristics about you. What type of music do you like to listen to? What kinds of photos do you have on there? This tells us in general that we have everything we need. Any piece of information pretty much that we need is at our fingertips. We don't have to look up maps. We don't have to go to AAA to get a map. It's right here. We don't have to watch the news to find out what the weather is, because we can look up the weather right here. And we don't even have to wear watches anymore, because there's one on your phone that tells you all of that information. So this tells a lot about how people lived. 10, 20, 100 years from now, when they look back at the technology that we've used, it's going to give them a good idea about how we lived. But I want you to think about your phone, what's on your phone, and how does that tell about your characteristics of your life and how you live. So after this, we're going to move on to an artifact project. So hopefully by watching these videos, you've gotten a good idea of what social studies is, what we're going to be doing this year, and that you've got a pretty good idea and definition of what an artifact is.